everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today we are talking about the Gael Song trilogy by Shauna Lawless. This is a historical fantasy trilogy set in Ireland starting in the 10th century at the time when there were Vikings in Ireland and in Dublin. And this series, I read the first book, Children of Gods and Fighting Men, last year in 2023, and I had some mixed feelings about it, but I decided to continue on with the series. And then this year I finished The Words of Kings and Prophets and The Land of the Living and the Dead, as well as the two novellas, Dreams of Fire and Dreams of Sorrow. So you may be able to tell that even though I had some mixed feelings about the first book, I ended up loving this series, and I'm so glad that I continued on with it. So I wanted to talk to you all about this series. So in this, we are following two main characters. We do get some other perspectives in later books, but our two main characters are Gorla and Fola. They both come from different magical races who are kind of on opposite sides of this like secret centuries-long war between their magical races, which has diminished their numbers on both sides. And the basic premise behind this war is that there are the fire wielders who essentially want to have control and power over mortals, and this is the group that our main character Gorla is a part of. Our other main character, Fola, her people, their mission essentially is to kill all of the fire wielders because they want to protect mortals from the control of the fire wielders. That is the original intent. That original intention may be corrupted over time, but that's kind of the premise of this, you know, generations and centuries long war between these two people. Gorla, who is one of the last fire wielders, starts out as a queen. She has a son, and she as a character is truly like ruthless, cutthroat in pursuit of power, willing to do anything, harm anyone to get what she wants, which is power for herself and her family. She is conniving and manipulative, and because of this, she really doesn't make connections with a lot of other people. You know, she has her son and her brother who she has some connection with, but she really is very like single-minded in her pursuit and really sees other people just as pawns to manipulate. This, for me, was one of the things that made her character a little bit less interesting because, like, I enjoyed kind of the ruthless nature of her character, but since she doesn't really have connections to other characters, it ended up making her feel a little bit one note, a little bit flat as a character to me, because she just really had like the one thing that she cared about. As the story goes on, and especially I think in the third book, she does develop some connections with other people, and we also start to see some of the cracks in her facade and in her control, which I think makes her a more interesting character. But I did have a little bit of a hard time really caring about her perspective parts, just because she felt very like one note, single-minded, like she just didn't feel super rounded as a character to me. Our other main character is Fola. She is a healer. As a character, she is very compassionate, very forgiving. She does start out very naive. She has been very sheltered and like kept away from the mortal world. At the beginning of the first book, she does get the opportunity to go into the mortal world on a mission. And as she does, she and we start to realize how sheltered she has been, but not just how sheltered, but that she's been lied to. She's been manipulated about and like lied to about what the world is like and, you know, what humanity is like. And so we really get to see her grow as a character as she comes into her own, as she finds her courage, as she you know, really gets to experience the world for the first time and gets to decide, like make up her own mind about what she thinks about the world and mortals. And so I think it's probably no surprise that she is my favorite character because one, I love a healer. Two, she makes a lot of connections with other characters, and that I think just makes her a much more interesting character to me because she connects with other people, which is interesting to read about. And also because she really grows over the course of the story and we get to follow her on this internal journey. I love character development, character growth. I love an internal journey for a character. Like, she's just all of the things that I love in a character. So she was definitely my favorite of the two. But I do think that although Gorla was maybe a little more like one note, the two of them as main characters were very good like counterpoints to each other because they were such opposites. So that did create an interesting contrast. Shauna Lawless also created a lot of other side characters, some that I loved, some that I hated. There is one character that is just like so infuriatingly hateable, but he was fun to hate. And there are definitely other characters that I, you know, developed a lot of affection for throughout the story, so I enjoyed that a lot. There's a little bit of a romance that is very much a subplot. It's not a main part of the plot, but I ended up being much more invested in this romantic subplot than I expected to be, which was a really pleasant surprise. I think that for me, I had some ups and downs with the series. Kind of, I had a down and then a lot of ups, maybe. That may not make sense. But essentially, I read the first book last year and I had some very mixed feelings about it. Essentially, my feelings were that it had a lot of elements that I'm like, I should like this, but I felt very meh about the book because I felt like in this first one they didn't spend enough time really on character development or focusing on like the characters, the relationships, those connections, and spent a lot more time focused on the plot, the politics and maneuvering, and like the historical context and setting. All of those things are important and they were interesting, but for me, I am very much a character-focused reader, and so I only really care about all of those things through the eyes of a character that I like or am interested in. Characters don't have to be likable for them to be interesting, right? But I need a character to hold on to connect to see all of these other aspects of the world, and that is what makes me care about all of those other aspects, is the character. I felt like in this book it was missing that character connection for me. It just didn't really spend enough time on developing the characters or their relationships to like really get that connection. But when I talked about that in my wrap-up for this book, a couple people I think commented on that video saying like, give the second book a shot, it gets better, it focuses more on characters in the second book, and they were right. I'm so glad that I did give the second book a try. I was kind of hesitant to go into the second book, The Words of Kings and Prophets, because I kind of was like, I don't know if I really care that much about this, but I picked this one up kind of on a whim and ended up loving it, became obsessed with it. I just like sat down and read half the book in one day, which is not something I tend to do. I tend to kind of, you know, pick at books a little bit more than that, not reading like large chunks at a time. And this is the one that really sold me on the series. This really does dive much more into the characters, the relationships, and really brings in that like emotional element that made me care about everything else that was happening in this story and in this world. After reading this, I immediately dove into reading the two novellas that are part of this series, and also went out and bought the third book so that I could just binge all of it back to back, which I really enjoyed binging this whole series. This I think was a really strong conclusion to the series. The second book is definitely my favorite of the main trilogy because this is the one that really like hooked me and pulled me in, but this was a really good conclusion as well. It had some really satisfying moments, especially moments of like characters getting their comeuppance. I was very stressed while reading this final book, and there were points where I kind of put off finishing the last little bit because I was like, I think some of my favorite characters are gonna die and I don't want to read it and I'm so stressed. But it was a really good conclusion to the story. This also has two novellas, which are Dreams of Fire and Dreams of Sorrow, and they are actually really good novellas and novellas that really contribute to the story. I feel like these are kind of the perfect thing for a novella, which is that you don't have to read them in order to understand or enjoy the main books, but they really add a lot if you do read them. Of the two, Dreams of Sorrow was my favorite of the novellas. I think Dreams of Fire adds some interesting backstory to a character, but isn't as like impactful to the like story of the rest of the series, whereas Dreams of Sorrow, it gives that backstory to a different character, which is really interesting, but also the information that we get in Dreams of Sorrow has big implications for the rest of the books in the series. In terms of reading order, obviously there's like just the basic reading order of the three main novels, but for the novellas, Dreams of Fire can probably be read at any time. I would say, if you're gonna read the novellas, read them before reading the third book, because I think they both contribute to context for this third book. Dreams of Fire can kind of be read at any time, but Dreams of Sorrow I think should really be read between the second and the third book to not spoil anything, but to give you the context that you need going into the third one. Well, not that you need, because I don't think that you have to read it, but it adds a lot and I highly recommend reading it because it's a really good novella. So I ended up really loving this trilogy, and I'm so excited that there are going to be more books. So these do have a complete story arc. You can read these 3 books plus the novellas if you want to, and that is a complete story, but she is also going to be writing a continuation series that's kind of like a next generation series. So this definitely does like conclude a full arc, but it also sets up another series following some of the characters that were in this series as kind of the next generation for another series, and I am so excited for it. I'm really looking forward to it. I think she has even more novellas coming out along with those. I'm so excited for it, but I would love to know if you have read this series and what you thought of it, or if you were thinking of reading it. But thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye.